Welcome to Just Stories. We hope you enjoy the story. The Bosnian War, Surviving Ethnic Tensions and Political Strife, by Just Stories. Chapter 1, Prelude to War: Historical and Political Context. The Bosnian War of 1992 to 1995 was a complex conflict that emerged in the context of the breakup of Yugoslavia, following the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The dissolution of Yugoslavia was a multi-year process that was marked by political instability, economic decline, and rising ethnic tensions. The Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia was founded in 1945 after the end of World War II. It was a federation of 6 republics: Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Slovenia. Under the leadership of Josip Broz Tito, the country was able to maintain a delicate balance between its various ethnic and religious groups, despite the fact that tensions were already simmering beneath the surface. However, after Tito's death in 1980, the country began to experience increasing economic difficulties and political tensions, particularly between the more nationalist elements within each republic. This led to the rise of separatist movements and demands for greater autonomy, particularly in Croatia and Slovenia. In 1991, both Croatia and Slovenia declared their independence from Yugoslavia, which triggered a series of wars that lasted until 1995. During this time, the federal government of Yugoslavia attempted to maintain control over the seceding republics, which led to military conflict and ultimately resulted in the disintegration of Yugoslavia as a federal state. Bosnia-Herzegovina declared independence on March 3, 1992, which was met with resistance from the Bosnian Serbs, who opposed independence and instead sought to remain part of Yugoslavia. The Bosnian Serbs, backed by the Yugoslav People's Army, quickly launched a military campaign to seize control of Bosnian territory. The conflict quickly turned violent, and Bosniak and Croatian forces also became involved in the fighting. The ethnic makeup of Bosnia-Herzegovina was complex, with Bosniaks, Bosnian Croats, and Bosnian Serbs all having significant populations within the country. The war was largely fought along ethnic lines, with each group seeking to carve out its own territory and establish dominance over the others. During the course of the war, all sides committed war crimes and atrocities against civilians, including ethnic cleansing, rape, and mass murder. The conflict was marked by brutal sieges of major cities, including Sarajevo, as well as widespread displacement and forced migration of populations. The international community was slow to intervene in the conflict, due in part to the complicated political and ethnic dynamics at play. However, over time, there were efforts to broker a peace deal, including the Dayton Accords of 1995, which brought an end to the war and established Bosnia-Herzegovina as an independent state. In conclusion, the Bosnian War was a complex conflict that emerged in the context of the breakup of Yugoslavia and the rising ethnic tensions that accompanied it. The war was marked by horrific violence and atrocities, as well as political and diplomatic struggles to bring an end to the fighting. Understanding the historical and political context of the Bosnian War is essential to comprehending the complexities of this conflict and its lasting impact on Bosnia-Herzegovina and the wider region. Chapter 2, The Siege of Sarajevo: Living Through the Conflict. The city of Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina, was one of the most heavily affected areas during the Bosnian War. The city was under siege by Bosnian Serb forces for more than 3 years, from April 1992 to February 1996. The siege resulted in devastating consequences for the city's residents, who were forced to live through a daily struggle for survival. During the siege, the Bosnian Serb forces surrounded Sarajevo and cut off access to the outside world. The city was subjected to constant shelling and sniper fire, with civilians being targeted indiscriminately. The shelling destroyed buildings and infrastructure, including homes, schools, hospitals, and other essential services. The lack of electricity, gas, and water made life even more difficult for those who remained in the city. The siege of Sarajevo was one of the longest in modern history, with more than 10,000 people being killed during the conflict. Those who survived the siege had to navigate through a maze of dangerous streets, constantly risking their lives to access essential services such as food and water. The only way to travel around the city was through a network of tunnels that were dug by the Bosnian army, which provided a lifeline to the outside world. One of the most striking images of the siege was the Sarajevo roses. These were craters in the streets caused by shells and mortars that were filled with red resin to mark the places where people had died. These roses were a stark reminder of the human cost of the conflict and the tragedy that had befallen the city. Despite the challenges and difficulties, the people of Sarajevo showed remarkable resilience and courage during the siege. They formed community groups to share resources and information, and they created a network of underground schools to keep their children's education going. Sarajevo's residents also kept the city's cultural life alive by organizing concerts, theater performances, and other events, even in the midst of the conflict. The siege of Sarajevo ended in 1996, with the signing of the Dayton Accords. However, the legacy of the conflict is still felt in the city today. Many buildings remain damaged or destroyed, and the city's population is still grappling with the trauma and loss of the conflict. Despite this, the people of Sarajevo have shown remarkable resilience and have worked to rebuild their city and their lives. In conclusion, the siege of Sarajevo was a tragic and devastating period in the history of the Bosnian War. The conflict resulted in the loss of thousands of lives and had a profound impact on the people of Sarajevo. However, the residents of the city also demonstrated remarkable courage and resilience, and their struggle to survive and rebuild their community is a testament to the human spirit. Chapter 3: Ethnic Cleansing and War Crimes, the International Response. The Bosnian War was marked by numerous war crimes and atrocities, including ethnic cleansing, mass murder, and rape. The international community was slow to respond to these atrocities, but eventually, there were efforts to bring perpetrators to justice and provide aid to those affected by the conflict. One of the most egregious examples of war crimes during the Bosnian War was the Srebrenica massacre, which occurred in July 1995. More than 8,000 Bosniak men and boys were killed by Bosnian Serb forces, despite the presence of Dutch UN peacekeepers in the area. The massacre was later declared an act of genocide by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. The international community's response to the atrocities in Bosnia-Herzegovina was slow and inadequate. The United Nations imposed an arms embargo on the region, which prevented Bosnia-Herzegovina from obtaining weapons to defend itself. The UN also established a peacekeeping force, UNPROFOR, but its mandate was limited, and it struggled to provide effective protection to civilians. In response to the lack of action by the international community, a group of countries formed the Contact Group, which sought to broker a peace deal in Bosnia-Herzegovina. The Contact Group proposed a plan that would have divided Bosnia-Herzegovina into 3 ethnically based regions. However, this plan was rejected by Bosniak and Croatian leaders, who argued that it would reward the Bosnian Serbs for their war crimes. In 1995, NATO launched a bombing campaign against Bosnian Serb positions, which helped to bring the conflict to a close. This bombing campaign was controversial, and it has been criticized for causing civilian casualties and damaging infrastructure. The international community also established the ICTY to prosecute war crimes committed during the Bosnian War. The ICTY was able to bring several high-profile war criminals to justice, including Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic and military commander Ratko Mladic. However, the ICTY was also criticized for its slow pace and for failing to hold some of the most prominent war criminals accountable. In conclusion, the international community's response to the war crimes committed during the Bosnian War was slow and inadequate. The UN arms embargo and limited mandate of UNPROFOR made it difficult to provide effective protection to civilians. The Contact Group's proposed peace deal was rejected, and NATO's bombing campaign was controversial. However, the establishment of the ICTY and the prosecution of war criminals provided some measure of justice for those affected by the conflict. Chapter 4: From Dayton to the Present: Rebuilding and Reconciliation. After the Dayton Accords were signed in 1995, Bosnia-Herzegovina emerged as an independent state. However, the aftermath of the conflict was marked by ongoing challenges, including the need to rebuild infrastructure and institutions, address the legacies of war, and promote reconciliation between ethnic groups. One of the key challenges facing Bosnia-Herzegovina after the conflict was the need to rebuild damaged infrastructure and institutions. The war had resulted in significant damage to buildings, roads, and other infrastructure, and many institutions had been severely weakened or destroyed. The international community provided significant aid and support to help with reconstruction efforts, but progress was slow, particularly in more rural areas. Another challenge facing Bosnia-Herzegovina was the need to address the legacies of war, including the many people who were displaced or lost loved ones during the conflict. The country struggled to provide support and assistance to those affected by the conflict, particularly as political and economic instability persisted. The government also faced challenges in dealing with the ongoing issue of missing persons from the conflict, with many families still searching for answers about the fate of their loved ones. Reconciliation between ethnic groups has also been a significant challenge in Bosnia-Herzegovina since the end of the conflict. The country remains deeply divided along ethnic lines, with many people still living in ethnically homogeneous areas. Political polarization and nationalist rhetoric have made it difficult to promote cross-ethnic cooperation and dialogue, particularly at the national level. Despite these challenges, there have been some efforts to promote reconciliation and bridge ethnic divides in Bosnia-Herzegovina. Civil society organizations and community-based initiatives have worked to promote inter-ethnic dialogue and understanding, particularly at the local level. Cultural events, such as music festivals and art exhibits, have also been used as a way to bring people together across ethnic lines. In recent years, there have been some positive developments in Bosnia-Herzegovina, including the establishment of a joint military force between the country's three main ethnic groups. However, political and economic instability continue to pose significant challenges, and the country remains divided along ethnic lines. In conclusion, the challenges facing Bosnia-Herzegovina after the Bosnian War have been significant and ongoing. The need to rebuild infrastructure and institutions, address the legacies of war, and promote reconciliation between ethnic groups have all been major challenges. While progress has been made in some areas, the country continues to grapple with political and economic instability, and the task of promoting cross-ethnic cooperation and dialogue remains a significant challenge. Chapter 5: Remembering and Memorializing Reflections on the Bosnian War. The Bosnian War of 1992 to 1995 was a traumatic and devastating conflict that had a profound impact on Bosnia-Herzegovina and the wider region. In the aftermath of the conflict, there have been numerous efforts to remember and memorialize those who were affected by the war, including through museums, monuments, and other cultural artifacts. One of the most significant memorials to the Bosnian War is the Srebrenica Memorial Center. This museum and memorial complex is located in the town of Potakari, near the site of the Srebrenica massacre. The center includes a museum that documents the events leading up to the massacre and provides information about the victims. The center also includes a cemetery where the victims of the massacre are buried. Another important memorial to the Bosnian War is the Tunnel of Hope Museum in Sarajevo. This museum documents the history of the tunnel that was dug beneath the city during the siege, which provided a lifeline for the city's residents. The museum includes exhibits about the siege of Sarajevo and the experiences of those who lived through the conflict. In addition to these museums, there are also numerous monuments and memorials throughout Bosnia-Herzegovina that commemorate the victims of the war. These include the Yellow Bastion Memorial in Mostar, which honors the victims of the Croatian-Bosniak conflict in Mostar, and the Monument to the Fallen Soldiers in Trebinje, which commemorates Bosnian Serb soldiers who died during the conflict. The process of remembering and memorializing the Bosnian War is an ongoing one, and it is often fraught with controversy and debate. Some argue that the focus on ethnic identities in many memorials perpetuates divisions between different groups, while others argue that these memorials are an important way to honor the victims of the conflict and promote healing and reconciliation. Beyond museums and monuments, there are also other ways in which the Bosnian War is remembered and memorialized. Cultural events, such as films, plays, and music festivals, often address themes related to the conflict and its aftermath. These events can help to raise awareness about the impact of the war and promote understanding between different groups. In conclusion, the process of remembering and memorializing the Bosnian War is an important part of coming to terms with the legacy of the conflict. Museums, monuments, and other cultural artifacts can help to honor the victims of the war and provide a space for reflection and healing. However, the process of memorialization is also complex and often controversial, as different groups have different perspectives on the conflict and its aftermath. Ultimately, the goal of remembering and memorializing the Bosnian War is to promote understanding, healing, and reconciliation between all those affected by the conflict. Thank you for watching our story. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, so you don't miss out on our next video.